These are mistakes that we come across as part of our work in the Center for Writing in English. This presentation was prepared by colleagues of ours at the Center for Writing in English over many years. So we have been, as you can see, many names on the screen, and we have been building and accumulating this material since 2012. So I am happy to be presenting to you. My name is Maimoonah Alkhalil. I helped found the Center for Writing in English in 2012, and I've had the honor of running it for 8 years, and now it's being run by a wonderful team of professionals who have brought to you a great series of workshops. Thank you for joining us today, and we will begin. So what do I mean by academic writing? If you are joining us today, you're probably involved in an academic program, and we need to be aware, first of all, of what we mean by academic writing. It's not creative or personal writing. Creative writing is a short story, a poem. Personal writing are more like your journal thoughts. Personal writing sometimes is what you express in a tweet, and so on. That's not what we're talking about here today. Creative writing and personal writing allow much more room for changes. What I am talking to you today and what I am considering mistakes are only mistakes in academic settings. So maybe some of the things we mentioned today are okay in other settings, but in academic settings, we're going to talk about ways in which you could avoid some very, very common mistakes. So what's the difference? Academic writing is anything you do to fulfill a requirement in school or university. So assignments fall under academic writing, reports fall under academic writing, essays, any kind of response to texts, all of those fall under academic writing. Even answers to tests and test questions on exams, those are all part of academic writing, and of course, research papers. Now, this is a very important point. You do not have to be a native speaker of English to master academic writing at all. Do not be deterred by the fact that you're not a native speaker. You don't need to be. All you need to be is just an aware writer. And there are many, many second language writers who are very good at academic writing, and in fact are leaders of academic writing across the world. So that's not an issue at all. And remember, writing is a skill, which means it's something you have to work on. And yes, it will improve, but it takes time and it takes effort. And so writing is not something people have by virtue or by gift. It's something people build and help grow over time. Now, this workshop is going to be about, first of all, common language mistakes that people do in writing. And then we're also going to be talking a little bit about cohesion towards the end, not so much, but it's important if we want to avoid some language mistakes. And we also want to talk about clarity. So, of course, when we are avoiding these mistakes, we're talking about being more clear and being more coherent. Why is it important to know common mistakes? First of all, they're common, which means they are recurrent. That means they happen again and again and again. They happen a lot. And maybe if we just pay attention to them, maybe if we just direct our attention to them today during this workshop, perhaps we can catch them, notice them, and then maybe do something about them and make that adjustment as opposed to just making the same mistake over and over again. Also, the fact that it's common means that it's committed by many, many writers. So not only will the same writer make the same mistake again and again, but a group of writers might be making the same mistake. And so this is worthwhile taking a moment to maybe focus on what those mistakes are. Also, these mistakes are made by even strong writers. So just because somebody speaks fluently or have a nice reservoir of vocabulary words doesn't mean that they will not be making mistakes. Even the best of us can benefit from a reminder here or there. So the aim is to identify mistakes and keep them in mind, hopefully so we can notice them and then avoid them by either making a change or readjusting what we say and saying it in a more correct manner. So first of all, you need to set up your Word document. This is very, very, very important. A lot of the mistakes that we find in the Center for Writing in English is because People have just come in with a Word document that is not set up accurately. So here's what I think is very, very important. The setup of your document, whether it depends, of course, here I say Word document, Microsoft Word, but you could be using Pages or you could be using any other word processing software. The same rules apply. You have to left align your document. Remember, we write in Arabic. Some of us write in Arabic, and so maybe you bought your computer in an Arab country and your computer is set up to open on a right alignment. So you need to make sure you adjust that alignment. Choose 12-point times New Roman font. That's usually the font that most assignments and most people are familiar with. It's the first option. Sometimes it's already chosen for you by default. 12-point is a good size to keep. Always double space. Do not play with the margins. Don't make them bigger or smaller. Keep them the standard size and avoid colors. Now, those are all recommendations that come with APA and MLA manuals, but these are just good rules to have. I'm going to stop sharing right now and show you what I mean in actual documents. All right, so here. So I'll open a Word document for you right now. I'm going to start a completely new document. And I hope it is clear for you and you can see it. And the first thing you want to do is go to the left alignment, and you will see, I'm not sure if you can see my cursor, but you will see that there are two triangles at the top, right under the word developer. One triangle is pointing from left to right, and the other triangle is pointing from right to left. Now, if we were writing in Arabic, we would choose the right to left, and we would type in Arabic from left to right. Okay, but if I want to type from, I want to change the whole alignment of my document, not just, remember, if you come to the paragraphs, it's going to change your cursor, but it's not going to change your document. However, if I want to type, let me start over, go left, change to English, and now my entire alignment is from left to right. So this is what I mean by alignment. These two buttons are very important. Sometimes students will tell us, oh, I didn't indent because my computer doesn't allow it, or I couldn't, I keep writing and the punctuation point keeps going to the other side of the document. It means there was an issue with your document. And these are all things that you should be doing from the very beginning. So first point is choose left alignment. Then I will choose the Times New Roman font. Then I will adjust to the 12-point font. Then I can move ahead and look at the double spacing. I can start it from now. And now I am ready to start writing. So take a moment to set up your document. Don't touch your margins. And that's going to give you a lot less trouble and headache as you are writing. All right, so I'm going to go back to the PowerPoint now. And this might be nice for people who are joining us now. So this was where we stopped. Do not use colors, keep everything in black. It's just a lot simpler on the eyes for you and for the person who's going to be reading it and grading it. So what do we mean by maintaining academic style? Keep your tone academic. Keep your tone formal. So it's okay to speak informally if you are tweeting or if you are texting on WhatsApp with your friends, but when you are speaking to your professor, when you are addressing your professor in a paper and you're writing, but the reader is your professor, you need to be formal and you need to maintain academic tone, meaning you have to make sure that you are using words and you are sounding like you are, as if you would be reading from a book and a textbook. So, and academic writing is actually quite simple because it's very direct and it's very to the point. So you don't really need to sound very fancy. You just need to be specific and clear. So, second point is demonstrate college level writing. Remember, I am speaking to you now from the university, from King Saud University, so I'm expecting that everybody here is probably around college level or is already in college level or even postgraduate level. And so, of course, that level requires clarity of thought, requires specific vocabulary, requires very clear progress from one thought to the next. And so naturally, we're going to be avoiding slang. We're going to be avoiding any informal language. Like I said, this is only for academic language. You could use slang or you could use informal language in other settings, but for academic setting, it's best that you do not. And so the point here about contractions like I can't or I won't or it doesn't or it shouldn't, all of those are okay in regular settings. They're okay. You might say, well, I just read a novel and they had that. Of course, novel is creative writing. And so these are contractions are fine when we're speaking. They're fine when we're reading creative writing or personal writing. But when we are working in an academic setting, when we're writing an essay or a research paper, it's best that you actually write out the words, not contract them. So say cannot, would not, does not, as opposed to contracting them and saying can't, won't, and doesn't. Another very, very important point that we are always reminding students to do is please avoid starting a sentence with and please avoid starting a sentence with but, because these are actually, we call them conjunctions. We call them, which is another word for connectors. Okay, they usually come after a comma in the middle of a sentence. So when you are conjoining two sentences together, that's when you would be using and or but, all right? Another point that students always have trouble with is capitalizing. Now, capitalization is a problem, especially for people whose first language is Arabic, because we do not have capitalization in Arabic. And of course, the first word in a sentence needs to be capitalized. Of course, any language, if we're writing the words Arabic or the words English or the words Spanish or Portuguese or Japanese, the names of the languages nafsaha need to be capitalized. Of course, the names of people and the names of places, the names of companies, we call those proper names. So anything that is a name of a specific entity, that is their name, that is what they are called by, all of those names need to be capitalized. So first word in a sentence, all languages, and the names of people and places and companies. That's important to keep in mind. And of course, there are a whole list of capitalization rules that you can find on the website for the Center for Writing in English that you can download right there and then. That can give you additional capitalization rules. But I'm just here mentioning the most common problems. Most commonly, students whose first language is Arabic don't feel the need to capitalize the first word in a sentence, but that's actually quite important. So these are some of the capitalization reminders. Also, you need to remember when to use transitions. Now, transitions are things that we use when we are about to shift in an idea. We've been talking about an idea for some time, for some sentences, and now we want to create a transition, a shift, a move. Now, when you want to make that move, there are some words that can help you make that move so the reader can follow your train of thought and can follow the logic. When you're doing that, transitions are very important. However, what some students do, and a very common mistake, is the overuse of transitions. So sometimes students will start sentence one, I enjoy mornings very much. However, immediately. However, I find it difficult to wake up in the morning. That is too soon for a transition. Save your transitions for when they really, really matter. So I could say I enjoy mornings very much, comma, but I find it difficult to wake up in the morning. Because it came so soon, hina, the word but is akhaf, it's lighter, and it would follow a lot faster. However here is so much more heavier, and when I read however, I'm imagining, you know, a whole set of sentences that are going to talk about the opposite of me enjoying mornings very much. And so use your transitions wisely. Save them and make sure you only use them where they matter. Try not to have too many transitions. I'm not saying don't have them, they're important. But ideally, in one essay, maybe you should have about 3 to 5 maximum. So keep them to a minimum and keep them only where you would need them. So that's what I have to say about transitions. And how can this sentence be improved? Like I said, perhaps but here, B-U-T, would be a better option. Now, we have to also keep in mind that some of the more common mistakes are in pluralization. So when I pluralize, I'm making something from single to plural. Some words don't pluralize. So for example, the word advice in Arabic, nasa'ih, because Arabic goes from nasiha to nasa'ih, we think we can go from advice to advices. Actually, advice works for a single piece of advice, and it works for 10 pieces of advice. So it's still just advice. And that's something it's important for us to, you wouldn't know that unless you really notice and stop and take a moment and see a lot of examples where advice, whether it's more than one piece of advice or just one piece of advice, they're all just advice. Also, a very, very, very common mistake is when people say researches. I was looking for researches on a specific topic. You mean the Arabic? Again, a lot of it is coming from the Arabic because the Arabic is very rich, and Arabic pluralizes in many different ways. And so here, research is just research, whether it's one research paper or several research papers. They're all collectively called research. And so we do not pluralize researches, another very, very, very common error. Another one too is evidence. The correct form for the singular and the plural is just evidence. So it's never evidences. Even if the Arabic is adilla, كجمع لدليل. So these are things that sometimes you just need somebody to point that out to you, and maybe it would be good to just catch yourself every time you find yourself writing advices and make it advice, or writing researches and making it research, or writing evidences and making it evidence. Now, the apostrophe, of course, the apostrophe is used for the possessive. And so if I'm trying to indicate that something is the property of someone else, I say the apostrophe has, Sarah's book is missing. That would be correct. So of course, it indicates possession. And notice in the second example, Bill's book is missing here. Because there's no apostrophe, I would think maybe it's plural, but actually I should have an apostrophe there to indicate that the book belongs to Bill. So Bill's book is missing here, it's missing an apostrophe. So when you're using apostrophes, remember and make sure that you are only using apostrophes to indicate the possession. But also, sometimes we use the apostrophe for the plural, but we have to make sure that we're using it correctly. So do not use an apostrophe to indicate that something is plural ever. We only use the apostrophe with the possessive. Sometimes if we say these are the girls' dresses, meaning these dresses belong to the girls and the girls are plural, then the only difference here we're going to make is just we're going to move the apostrophe down so it's after the S. That's the only difference. But still, the apostrophe is still an indicator of possession. The apostrophe is never used as an indicator of plural. So here the dogs are barking, no apostrophe, that's correct. If I say the dogs and I put an apostrophe before dogs to indicate plural, that would be incorrect. If I put an apostrophe to indicate possession, then that would be correct. Now, the subject-verb agreement is another very common error. Sometimes you have baby singular, but you say the baby are crying. Here, it should be the baby is crying. So be careful whenever you have a verb and you have a noun, make sure that the subject and the verb are agreeing. All right. Also, sometimes we have a noun and a pronoun. So, for example, the salesman has to go to his station because it's a salesman. So here we put there, and there is for the plural and it doesn't work. So make sure that you are putting agreement here between subject and verb, and agreement between the noun and the pronoun. Also, we also have things like don't write in the second person. This is also another very common mistake that comes to us in the Center for Writing in English, and that's because in our informal way of speaking, we always say, if you لنفرض انك انت something happened to you, and in Arabic, speaking to the person directly. And so we kind of carry that into our English writing, and we say, if you were to go somewhere, or if you were to do something, you probably wouldn't like this, or you probably wouldn't like that. And so by doing that, academically, that is not, it's not recommended at all that you speak to your reader directly. In creative writing, there's a lot of direct speech to the reader. Even in personal writing, there's a lot of direct speech to the reader. But in academic writing, you need to write academically with some distance. And so avoid using you and your or anything in the second person. So instead, if you really have to talk about something that is general and applies to everyone, you could use the word one. So instead of saying, whenever you feel like eating something sweet, try to reach for an apple, you can say, whenever one feels like eating something sweet, the recommendation is that they reach for an apple. So there, if you must write in that way, then at least you can choose the word one as opposed to you. Okay, another very common thing that we bring in to our academic writing from Arabic is the asking questions. You might see in a lot of academic writing in Arabic, or in especially in newspaper writing in Arabic and in columns, where they start with questions. Asking about anything like, have you ever noticed that some things are one way and not another? That's common in Arabic, that's acceptable in Arabic. In English, if you're starting off an essay with questions, that's okay, but it's not recommended academically. And so use statements, not questions. That's much better. So don't start your paragraph by saying, why should cell phones be banned in class? Instead, immediately just rephrase the same question, but make it a statement, and just indicate your position. Cell phones should be banned in class, for example. And then that would be your topic sentence.
Our aim was to assess how ECD exposure weekly based affect their accuracy of ECD, because professional development is key.
Okay, I think we're getting some interference.
جميلة جدا. جميلة. شوفوا
Okay, sorry about that. So basically start with a very direct statement. That would be better. Another thing that is a common mistake also, especially when students are not very confident in their writing, is the essay becomes a collection of quotes. And we call that excessive quoting, especially when people are writing in literature, for example, and they are writing about a novel or they're writing about a play. And sometimes they quote excessively, so that almost the entire essay is made up of quotes with only a few words or sentences connecting the quotes. Here, we always stop them and say, with quotes, you have to be very selective, meaning what is the most powerful quote? Choose that quote and keep that quote. And all the other quotes can be paraphrased. So paraphrasing basically means take that quote, say it in a different way, and say that this character said so-and-so. So report instead of direct quoting. And that, when you do that, your quote will have a lot more meaning. It's going to have a more profound effect. It's going to be special. And remember, we only quote because it's better said in the words of the source than it is in our words. And so make sure you're very, very selective. And my recommendation would be, if it's one essay, try to keep it to a minimum of, 3 or 4 quotes. That would be my maximum, actually, and minimum of 2 or 1 if you must. And so now some fields are different than others. Literature quote a lot, and that's okay. But in other non-literature disciplines, I would recommend selecting quotes very, very selectively. Of course, edit your work. A lot of students sometimes will wait until the last minute, stay up all night writing, and then just submit that version without taking a moment to read through it one more time. Be careful if you're typing. Spell check is a very wonderful tool. However, it might give you the wrong spelling. So you need to really pay attention and make sure that the suggestion that spell check is giving you is the actual selection that you want. Also, you want to make sure you avoid lengthy and run-on sentences. So sentences like that have too many ands, that's probably a sentence that should be cut into 2 sentences or 3. If you have too many conjunctions, consider revising that sentence and cutting it up or rewriting it entirely. And one really nice tip to make sure you catch your mistakes is once you're done, because your eyes got so used to the draft, sometimes you will miss some mistakes that you know, clearly you know how to write them, but it's a mistake and you missed it. And so a very good tip is to read it out loud. Of course, when we're writing, we're not reading out loud. We're usually reading silently and just with our eyes. And so right before you submit, read it out loud to yourself or have somebody else read it, and that might show you some errors that you did not notice earlier on. And also read the feedback. Instructors take a lot of time, Instructors take a lot of time writing comments for you on previous assignments. And unfortunately, what students do is they take the assignment back and only look at the grade and then put it away. If it's a good grade, they are happy and they put it away. If it's a bad grade, they are upset and they put it away. But they're not really reading the feedback that is provided by the instructor. Take a moment, even if the grade is not that great, and take a moment and make sure you understand every single piece of feedback that the instructor has made. By the way, feedback is one of those words that you don't pluralize. It's just like evidence, and it's just like research, and it's just like advice. We don't say feedbacks. Okay, so every piece of feedback that your instructor gives you, read it, take note of it, and make sure you don't do it again. And the reason we say read it and pay attention to it is because if you're making that mistake, it means you're probably going to make it again in the next essay. And so take a moment, understand it. If you don't understand it, shoot an email to your professor and say, you wrote for me this comment and I did not understand it. And then you could probably schedule some time with your professor and make sure what the professor or instructor meant by that comment so that you benefit from that comment and so you do not make that mistake again. So these are very, very important things that sometimes students are just in too much of a hurry that they end up making the same mistake again. Their grades stay low. And if they had simply just taken a moment to understand all the feedback that was provided to them, perhaps their next grade would have been better. So here I'm just reminding you to please mute your microphones and to put any questions in the chat box. I am not looking at the questions now, but I will be looking at them at the end of the workshop, and there will be a time for Q&A. So I'm happy to look at them then. Also, just make sure you stay with us long enough to earn your certificate, and there will be a poll where you evaluate this workshop towards the end. Now I want us to do an activity together, and I will not be hearing from you, but I would like you to kind of just interact on your end with this activity. And basically, I'm going to show you some sentences, and I want you to, just from reading that sentence, decide for yourself whether you think it's correct or not. Now, these mistakes, the mistake could be anything. It could be spelling, it could be punctuation, it could be word choice, it could be anything. So just read it and see if it feels right to you and how it could be adjusted. So the first one here is Maryam is a great teacher. She learned her students how to write from day one. In your judgment, do you think this is a correct sentence? If you said incorrect, it definitely is incorrect. The problem here is a vocabulary problem. Many students have a problem distinguishing between the words teach and learn. Teach is the teacher teaching, so the knowledge is going from the teacher to the learner, and learn is the other way around, so the knowledge is coming to the person, so you're learning. And here, because Maryam is a good teacher, she's probably doing the first one. She is probably teaching. So here, how would we adjust it? We cannot say teached, right? Because that would be an incorrect form of the past tense. We would be saying taught. So Maryam is a great teacher. She taught her students how to write from day one. All right. Here is the second example. He wanted to give her a flower. Is this correct or incorrect? He wanted to give her a flower. This would be correct. No issues with capitalization, no issues with grammar. We have a punctuation point at the end. This is fine. What about he gave her a great books? He gave her a great books. If you said it's incorrect, that is definitely incorrect. And there's a problem here because we either say he gave her great books or we say he gave her a single great book. So the problem here is with the article a. If we say a, we mean one. And so we can't have a and s at the same time. So choose which one it is. If it's one book, it's going to be a great book. If it's books, several, we're going to remove the a. Here's another one. He gave her a lot of books. What's the problem here? If there is a problem. It is incorrect. First of all, a lot is two words, not one. So we need to separate here, put a space. Second of all, a lot is not academic. It's informal. It's used a lot in slang, but we don't recommend using it in academic writing. And there are so many other options and alternatives. So what's the right answer? I could use he gave her many books. I could say he gave her several books. I could say he gave her a great number of books. And so there are many other ways of indicating the same idea, but sounding more academic. What about this one? I don't like Maha's new haircut. I don't like Maha's new haircut. Is there an issue? If so, what is it? It's not incorrect, but it's informal. And that's because we used a contraction, an abbreviation, don't. And here we said, it's better not. So it's better if we say, I do not like Maha's new haircut. And here we see the apostrophe S. I see a hand raised, and if you could just keep your comment until I'm about to go into a Q&A session. And so just hold on to your thoughts and we'll get back to you. Here, when it comes to eating, people differ in their taste. When it comes to eating, people differ in their tastes. I kind of gave you a hint there by the way I read it. What do you think? Is this a correct sentence? When it comes to eating, people differ in their tastes. It's incorrect. Even though the words are all correct, and the grammar is correct. However, we need punctuation here because otherwise it's as if, you know, from the way you read it, you might think somebody's eating people. But actually, when it comes to eating, comma, people differ in their tastes. All right, so here the meaning changes. You have to have that little separation of the condition, which is when it comes to eating, people differ in their tastes. Otherwise, without the comma, you won't know where to stop in your reading. So commas and punctuation in general are very important for your understanding. So the comma here actually makes a difference and would make people think that you're not eating people. But when it comes to eating, people have different tastes. Some people like spicy food, some people like sweet food, and so it's different from culture to culture and age group to age group. Now look at this. How would you punctuate this statement? Now, I'm not going to go into meaning here, but just think punctuation. Punctuation really plays a huge role in this statement. Because if you punctuate it this way, a woman, comma, without her man, comma, is nothing. Or a woman, colon, without her, man is nothing. You see what happened there? This is actually a statement written by a professor for his students to try and show how punctuation can really alter the meaning. Now, whether we agree with this or not, that's not the issue here. The issue is in the first statement, the woman is nothing. In the second statement, the man is nothing. And so what made that difference was the punctuation. And so you really have to put a lot of thought into punctuation. It is important. And ladies and gentlemen, it is not optional. Capitalization and punctuation are not optional. And so it's very important that you know the rules and that you use them properly. So punctuation definitely is powerful. All right, I'm going to move on. Of course, usually when we hold these activities, sometimes pre-corona, we used to do them face-to-face and we used to group people into groups. However, we're going to continue on just the same way we've been doing the last set of activities. But here, decide which word should be used in the following statement. And these are commonly mistaken word choices of words that sound the same. All right? So, first one. The blank is amazing. If you said weather, W-E-A, then you are correct, because the first weather is when you're about to indicate a choice. And so the weather is amazing. Okay, it's cool and rainy. What about the next one? Grades, blank, students' confidence. Effect and effect. They sound the same, but they have different meanings. Not necessarily, really. But they're actually two different parts of speech. And you have to understand which one is which. One is a verb and one is a noun. So I hope you made the right choice. It's effect. Okay, grades effect. The verb starts with an A and the noun starts with an E. Okay, so if I wanted to say the effect of grades on students, هنا the effect جاية بعد the after an article, a noun, it would be E, the effect. The effect of grades on students is quite profound, مثلا. However, here I'm using it as a verb. So I say grades affect students, so it's going to be a verb, so it's the one that starts with an A. They're essentially the same word except parts of speech. What about 3? This is a very common error. There and there, they sound the same. They have two different meanings. One is there, meaning a place, like where can I find the book? It's right there. If you can maybe be pointing at a book, for example. So there meaning a place. And then there's there meaning the personal pronoun, which is indicates possession, like those are their books, the students' books, or those are their pens. So they belong to the students. So here students can check blank their grades online. And here, because it's their grades and its possession, then the one that is in the middle, EI, that's the pronoun for possession. And their, ERE, that's the what we use as a demonstrative, as telling me where something is. I hope you keep these in mind because these are really, really common mistakes. Look at this sentence. I do not need blank, I need help. I have advice and I have advise. One is a noun and one is a verb. Which one is which? Now, of course, here, I need a noun here. So the noun is advice. Advice is a noun. And I want to remind you that we don't pluralize advice. If I were to use advise, that would be the verb. So I say, here, let me give you a piece of advice. هنا استخدمت the noun, advice. I advise you, here's the verb, to read outside of the curriculum. Build your vocabulary. So that's going to be my advice, noun with a C, and I advise them, verb with an S, to do more reading. Next one. I'm sorry, please blank my apology. Accept and accept. They sound alike. There's a minor difference in the beginning. They mean two completely different things, of course. Which is it? The answer is accept. Accept is a verb. Please accept my apology. Except is when I'm doing an exception. So for example, I can say, I enjoy all kinds of food except, and you specify a specific kind of food, for example. So الاستثناء, and that's when we use except. And students sometimes don't pay attention to that and make that common mistake. Next one, we have many colors, blank, one do you like? Now these two words sound exactly the same, but they are not the same at all. And of course, the answer is going to be, I hope this is an easy one for everybody, which, WH, and not which relating to magic. And so these are just very commonly mistaken words. Sometimes through spell check, they get that spelling wrong, sometimes just because students are not very familiar with the language, or they haven't done enough reading, or they haven't seen the words. These two options of the words in different contexts, that they don't realize the difference between those words. All right, so let me move on now to cohesion. And what do I mean by cohesion? So we looked at the common mistakes now, common mistakes in spelling, in words, in capitalization, punctuation. Now we need to make sure that when we're writing, we write cohesively. What do I mean by that? Basically, each paragraph has to have one main idea. Don't clump too many ideas in one paragraph. If you have too many ideas, that means you need several paragraphs. That's all. But be focused in your writing. Academic writing is about making a statement and then corroborating that statement, extending that statement, bringing in evidence for that statement in one paragraph. And then if you have another idea and another statement, then start a whole new paragraph and do the same thing. So in one paragraph, you need one idea, and all the ideas should be connected. So if I have several paragraphs Paragraph 1 should be the introduction that leads into paragraph 2, which probably has my first piece of, my first, for example, statement that would corroborate my idea, and then I explain it, and then the third paragraph would be another corroborating piece of information, and I explain it. And so what cohesion means is I have cohesion within one paragraph and cohesion across the subsequent paragraphs. And basically what cohesion means is that there is a connection from one sentence to the next. And usually that connection goes from broad to more specific, or I mention something and then I start numbering issues that relate to it, listing, for example, or maybe I'm describing a situation and so I describe spatially. There are so many different organizational patterns that I can develop a paragraph in. But what we have to mean when we mean we are writing cohesively is we have one idea and then we support that idea and don't cause any more ideas to lose the focus of that one idea. And then when I move on to the second paragraph, I start with another single idea, and then I support that second single idea. And of course, idea 1 and idea 2 need to be related somehow. And that's what we mean by cohesion. Okay, so how can we apply it? There are several ways to apply it, but the most importantly is keep focused. Keep focused. And when you are focused, you're going to notice that the clarity, which is the third point I want to talk about, your clarity goes. So with a lot of students who come to the Center for Writing in English, when we sit down with them and we look at their first draft, we notice that they have excellent ideas, but those ideas are not organized. And so the first thing we do is we help them just detangle those ideas. We take every single idea and put it on a piece of paper by itself. And then once we take out all the wonderful ideas from that first draft, we look at them separately, each idea alone, and then we decide which ones belong together. And sometimes by just doing that, you built yourself a very good paragraph by deciding which ideas go together. Sometimes we notice that, oh, these ideas are so different, they can't be together. Actually, each idea is its own paragraph. And so now we think of how to support that one good idea. And so that instead of it being one sentence, it becomes a paragraph. And here, become a lot more clear because the first draft, the ideas were bunched together, crowded, and you lose the value that way. The reader does not appreciate all the thought that you put into that paragraph. But if you take those ideas, look at them separately, decide which ones go together, which ones are good for the introduction, which ones are good for the body, which ones are a good way to end the essay, for example, then you have a lot more clarity. And so one thing also we notice students do is they assume that their reader knows everything. So let's say that they are writing about a play and they think we already know the play, and they start the paragraph immediately by saying, let's say the main character's name is, for example, Ahmed. And then you will say, Ahmed was very angry with his mom. Ahmed is a person who has temper tantrums and has a problem managing his anger. And you keep on talking about this characteristic about Ahmed, but you didn't tell us what book this character is coming from. You didn't tell us who the author is. You didn't tell us what year this book came out in. You're assuming that you're only writing to your professor, but even the professor needs background context. And you need to get into the habit of always establishing your context before you get into any specifics. And so that is something that would help with clarity. So how do we fix that? Make sure you start with your background information at the very beginning. Make sure you cover all aspects of introducing what you're talking about. Are you talking about a novel? Tell us about this novel in the first 2 sentences. Are you talking about a scientific experiment? Tell us about the main people in the scientific experiment in the first 2 sentences. There has to be some way of contextualizing what you're saying, and that needs to come at the very, very beginning. Don't assume anything. Don't assume that your reader knows anything. We always tell our students who visit the Writing Center, assume that I am a dumb reader and that you're writing to a dumb reader, knows nothing. is not another person in your class, is not your professor, and they are supposed to be able to understand this paragraph even if they've never set foot into your class. And even if they are outside of your field. Imagine that if you're an English student and a biology major is reading this paragraph. So you need to give this biology major all the necessary information, the name of the book, the name of the author, the year the book came out, and then tell us about who this character is. Is he the father? Is he the son? And then tell us what age group he's in, and then tell us what you really want to tell us about his anger issues. So that's going to help with clarity, ease your reader into your writing, and make sure you're doing it with academic tone. All right. So also have someone outside the field, like I said, a biology major read, that can help you. Anybody at home from another field, let them take a look at it, a very quick look, and tell you if it makes sense to them or not. Also, always begin with the general knowledge in the introduction so that you can contextualize and then you move ahead. All right, this is my last slide before I go into questions and answers. How to improve writing. I now presented to you in our first hour most common mistakes that we have come across in the Center for Writing in English, and from many years of teaching writing to students for whom English is a second language. They always come up to me, and these are wonderful students, and they really want to do better, and they really care about their grades, and they care about their skill. And so they're always asking, what can I do to improve? The first thing I recommend is to read, and then read some more. And when I say read, I'm not saying go read boring articles or newspapers or nonfiction books. Read whatever it is you're interested in, just do it in English. So if you're, for girls, if you're interested in fashion and makeup, read fashion and makeup magazines. I mean, boys, if you're interested, I mean, I don't assume to know any boys or girls' interests, but it could be car magazines, it could be fashion magazines, it could be fiction, short novels, it could be short stories, reading. And why I say reading here, and I'm not saying watch things like shows and movies. When you read, you're looking at text, and looking at text, you don't feel like you're learning, but you're actually learning. You're probably really a story or really enjoying the article, but actually you're building vocabulary. Your brain is making prints of the word, the correct spelling of the word. And by reading a word over and over and over again, that print becomes deeper in your mind. And then you will be able to catch a mistake, the difference between which and which, for example, WI and WH. You'll catch that. And even if spell check gives you the wrong option, you will catch that and say, no, that's not what I want from spell check. And so you will reject the spell check suggestion. You can only build that kind of sensitivity, and you can only build that kind of vocabulary, and you can only build that kind of awareness of sentence structure, even punctuation. And where I use punctuation, that gets built subconsciously by reading. And read, again, read fun stuff, things that are fun to you. They don't have to be serious at all. So just make sure you're reading. That is recommendation. And here we have a picture of our reading room at the Department of English in King Saud University. That's just a very comfortable space for students to grab a book and read. And they meet, again, pre-corona times, every Thursday for 1 hour to discuss a specific book. I'm sure in all of your different contexts, you probably have book groups as well, or book clubs. And that's a very great way of building your vocabulary and improving your writing by having fun, really, and just enjoying a story or a play or a poem. So that's the first way. The second way is to write. So to learn writing by writing. And that's the picture of the entrance to the Center for Writing in English at King Saud University on the female side. And just write. And what I mean by write is for every single assignment, it's okay to do 3, 4, 5 versions. Start with draft 1 and then draft 2 and then draft 3. It's okay to do it as many times as you like. In our case, our students at the university, we encourage them to visit the Writing Center as many times as they want. We don't have limits on visits. And of course, what that means is beginning work on an assignment very early so that you have time to discuss it with a consultant, go back and work on it some more, then come back and discuss it with a consultant and go back and work on it some more. Or you don't have to go to a writing center if you don't have a writing center in your institution. You could just discuss it with a colleague, discuss it with your instructor if they allow that. And that kind of discussion and talking and writing and rewriting, that goes a long way in building your writing skills long term. All right. So I'm going to open it up for Q&A now. And then I have a few practice sentences that I have here. If we have time, we can go into them. More of the ones I showed you now, but I want to make sure I get to hear from our participants today.